Ed, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for joining. We're big fans of Hyland and the team that you all have. But to start, maybe tell us a little bit beyond the kind of the LinkedIn front page, what Hyland is and what you all do.
Sure. Well, first of all, my pleasure, and thanks so much for having me. Definitely appreciate being here. Hyland, we're a 31-year-old company now, born and raised on the west side of Cleveland, Ohio, which is something that a lot of Highlanders feel very proud about. We got a lot of native Clevelanders that work at Hyland, based over on the west side. So Hyland has really kind of stuck to its knitting throughout our history. So we are in a space that today is called the content services space. At one time was called enterprise content management. Before that, enterprise document management. And really, our focus is on, the digitization of, corporate assets, whether they be, documents, whether they be PDFs, faxes, emails, office files, whether it's discrete data that, takes part in some sort of process across the company. And we want to, help store that information, govern it, secure it, automate its place in different processes throughout the organization. And, more and more what we're seeing is people focusing on, digital assets as a part of that. So video and, digital photography, those sorts of things, as part of, where they like to leverage Hyland solutions. We do a lot of business in the healthcare space. So, here in Cleveland, we are, proud to have the likes of Cleveland Clinic and UH and Metro Health, all as part of our, customer base. So we've been Gartner leaders at what we do for the last 13 years. And I personally started at Hyland back in 2001. I was employee 170 at that time. And we're approaching 5,000 employees as a company. So I've gotten to witness a lot of very cool growth over the years.
That's great, Ed. And one of the a couple things I love there, you mentioned, 30 plus years. It's Hyland, at least when I think of tech, and that's one of the interesting vantage points and perches I have, is doing this statewide. And so I get to, learn and meet in Cleveland and Columbus and Cincinnati and Dayton. But when I think of, the Ohio born, bred, built tech success stories and companies, Hyland's up there because, as you mentioned, 30 plus years, and west side of Cleveland. And another interesting, fun thing is as I've gotten to know different people at the company, your story of being around since 2001, that seems very similar. That seems like it seems as though Hyland is a company where people oftentimes build, their entire careers or large chunks of their careers. And now with 5,000 employees, that has continued to be built. What is it that you think makes Hyland that special place to work? Again, as I'm talking with you, as I'm talking with John and others on the team, there's a long history of joining the company, rising through the ranks, staying on. What is it that makes it special and make all that possible?
Culture. One word, culture, honestly. And I'm not a native Ohioan. I've lived in Ohio twice now, for 6 years, both times. And one thing that I will say is that there is something to be said for the Midwestern Ohio roots of the company. And I don't say that for the purpose of this podcast. I've said it to many folks that I've talked to. Highlanders care about each other. They care about customers. They care about partners. And, I tell our customers, everyone says that, right? Every sales presentation ever, the company walks in and says, oh my gosh, we care about our customers and we're going to take care of you and we're going to be the best. But, the proof always comes when things get hard, right? That's when you see the true colors of people, of companies. And, I've watched Hyland over the years, really rise to the occasion, whether, it's a customer with a challenge, whether it's an employee with a challenge, during the height of Corona, you know, the work that we did with hospitals around the country, particularly in, you know, the most affected areas in New York, et cetera. You know, what I've seen Highlanders do for other Highlanders. You know, we actually have a funding initiative called Highlanders for Highlanders, where, you know, we can donate money for the purposes of helping out Highland folks in need. So, you know, with Hurricane Ian, you know, we've got people in the Fort Myers area, in Cape Coral, in you know, Naples, that have been affected, and the way that the company cares for its own, you know, it matters. And I think in a world that's become, you know, all too polarized, and you know, if you spend much time on social media, I would dare to say even angry, you know, I think that Hyland gives people a place where they know they're cared about, and they have an opportunity to care for each others. And when you bring that, I think what it translates to is, you know, a purpose that goes beyond a paycheck, right? It's not just about, you know, I'm here to make money. I'm here because I feel like there's a purpose to what I'm doing. I feel like there's a purpose to the people around me, to what we do for our customers and partners. And you know, I like to think that that matters for folks. And, you know, you hit it on the head. You know, the average tenure of our executive team is over 17 years.
Wow.
Which in any business is surprising. In tech, almost unheard of.
Yeah, that's amazing. And the other thing is that tenure, you know, said 17 years, the company, you know, having been around for a while, there are incredible ebbs and flows with not just companies, but with regions, with states. Certainly Cleveland, Northeastern Ohio more broadly, has seen that and experienced that. And I'm from Northeastern Ohio too. And there's, you know, been a lot to be proud of over the years. There's also been a lot of setbacks. And it seems like the past couple and recently, there are some significant wins that our state and our regions have had. And Intel coming to Ohio, Honda and LG and their EV battery plant that's coming to Fayette County. I think of Lorain County with Ford and their EVs. And there's this kind of this future of our economy is being built in Ohio. And I know that's something that Hyland is passionate about. But as I specifically think of Hyland and your all's role and Perch as really kind of probably the leading company, frankly, in Northeastern Ohio in this tech scene, you know, what makes it, you know, a passion for the company? Because you mentioned 5,000 employees. You all are buying companies, doing work globally, but there's this incredible commitment to what's, you know, been built in the west side of Cleveland, Northeastern Ohio. Where does that come from, and what continues to keep Hyland and the leadership so excited, even when your jobs are literally taking you across the globe?
Sure. Well, I think, you know, I think the word contagious, frankly, is the one that popped to mind as you were saying it. You know, as I mentioned, I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and went to school in Pennsylvania. I moved to Tampa for 10 years, and then I moved to the Cleveland area. And, you know, the thing that I describe to others, you know, about Ohio, is that I think it's very communal. I think it's very friendly. I think people look out for one another. I think there is that blue collar value set, regardless of, you know, your job type. There is I think a pride that, you know, working hard matters and means something. And I think that, you know, for anybody that's spent time, you know, in Westlake or in Ohio, you know, working for Hyland, you know, they've got that. It's DNA. Right. I mean, it's literally they're born and bred with it. And, you know, it's funny because, you know, I have moved around, you know, and people will ask me, for example, about my sports affinities, you know, and I tell them that, you know, I root for the Cleveland teams, and I root for them because the fan base, you know, has this undeniable belief, no matter what, in the face of, you know, whatever's going on, that this is the year. And I think that's culture in Ohio, like that, regardless of the current state, that something better will come, and it'll come from working hard at it. And it's not hyperbole. It's just, I mean, you feel it in the people that you talk to. And so I think that, when we hire, even when we hire outside of, Ohio, I think that those personality traits, those, ethics, and ethic is probably another word I would say.
Mhm.
I think people are highly ethical, in those Midwestern roots. We hire, even though we hire outside of Ohio, I would tell you that the people we hire look a lot like and sound a lot like and are a lot like the people in Ohio. And, you mentioned acquisitions. Even as we acquire, we will look at cultural fit. We had an opportunity, some number of years ago to look at an acquisition where, not only was the geography different, but the culture in that geography was different. I'm talking in the U.S. And it was, viewed by us as a risk.
Yeah.
To Hyland's culture, which we, as I said, view as a differentiating factor. So I think I think there is something to be said about you look at our CEO Bill, born and raised Clevelander, grew up in University Heights. You look at our founders, grew up in Cleveland. I mean, so many of us across the executive team are born and raised here, and I think that local culture permeates through the organization, no matter how far and wide we extend.
What you just mentioned, as you're looking at acquisitions and checking culture fit and working to ensure that, that's a big piece to it. Curious, what are you looking at when you are looking at a company? And I'm, not asking in just in that kind of acquisition, but I think that's a great kind of model for which I'm sure you can then apply for your own company wide, teams within the company, and tech pros that are listening to this for their own. So
Yeah.
I guess just, what do y'all look for when it comes to some of that culture fit? And, what are some of those keys or characteristics that, stand out most to you?
Well, I think it starts with the management team. Any acquisition process is going to start with, management presentations.
Yeah.
And in those management presentations, you're going to get an immediate feel for, what is the culture of that company, what drives them, what's important to them. But you have to maintain an understanding that, oftentimes those senior management folks, don't come across with the acquisition. They go on to other ventures or whatever it is they're going to do, but they've established something they leave behind. And, if that culture is going to be at a clash, for example, our core values, we are posted on our wall. Now, there's a lot of that, again, across other companies, but we reference them all the time. We reference them in decision making. We reference them in hiring. We reference them, and one of them is, our employees are our family.
Yeah.
And when you say that, and you go talk to another company, you can just through gut get a feel pretty quickly whether that permeates an organization. And it doesn't have to be exactly the way that we mean it, but at some level there should be that kind of, I really care about my people and I really care about my customers and we really care about each other. Those are core. And I think that you can discern that. And I think that a great example of where that manifests itself. So we acquired a company, arguably, really not arguably, our number one competitor for many years was a company out of Kansas City called Perceptive Software. And we acquired them in 2017. And, in many ways, when we saw the management presentation, it was like looking in a mirror. The way they approached things, we suddenly had a great understanding why we were such competitors, why we lost when we did, why customers would often say, I really can't tell the difference. And it was because there was so much alignment, not just technology, but culture. And so as those people became a part of Hyland, And in fact, when our CEO, spoke to them shortly after acquisition and said, that he really looked forward to, embracing what was kind of the old culture of that company. They gave him a standing ovation. And, it just was clear that, this was going to be a success.
Yeah.
And in large part because, there was a fit there. And it wasn't just, hey, they've got cool tech, let's plug that in. It's got to be more than that.
Yeah. You mentioned they were Kansas City based, which makes a lot of sense.
Lost on us, again.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like there's
right.
Yeah, it's it makes a lot of sense. And it's that Midwest probably mentality and mindset, regardless if you're in Kansas City or Cleveland.
Yeah, there was a bit of a rift in early September last year when the Chiefs played the Browns, but we're better now.
Yeah. Just, it's Sundays and the Monday after might be a little tough, but that's awesome. One thing I wanted to ask you about was Cleveland, Northeastern Ohio's role in the future of tech, but manufacturing tech and innovation specifically. And I rattled off a few moments ago, things like Intel and their semiconductor in Licking County, Honda just announcing in Fayette County, $4 billion plus investment, Ford in Lorain County. I love these stories because it's things that Ohio has been great at and has built a culture of, and a sense of pride of building things and things that matter. And now it's taking it to that kind of next iteration, the future of it from, 30 years ago, building cars looks different for the next 30 years. And so, what is, your thoughts either as an individual tech leader on some of this stuff, or maybe Hyland's perspective as a tech company that leads in Northeastern Ohio. But what's the role here for our state, for our regions? What's the opportunity that you think we have?
Well, I sort of, I look from the past first, and I think about, when I first started at Hyland, when I first moved to Cleveland. The idea, to your point, in 2002, when I first moved to Cleveland, of companies like Intel even having Cleveland on a consideration list it just would not have happened, right? I mean, I think if we're going to be and forget Cleveland, like just Ohio, right? It just wasn't how Ohio, I think, was looked at. You mentioned some of those other companies that are coming in, the looks that, at one point, Amazon was considering, the Cleveland area, whether we win all of those or lose all of those, part of it starts with, you got to have the at-bats, right? And to have the at-bats, you have to have really changed the perception of what the area brings. And I think that's happened, right? And I think, Hyland would have told you for many years, that we kind of had this secret sauce, right? We kind of had this, great scenario where, first of all, there is a ton of university talent in Ohio, right? I mean, there is just a tremendous amount of, really well-qualified college grads coming out of these Ohio schools year after year after year. And so a part of that, we've had this vibrant internship program for the entire time that I've been working here that now goes into, we do work with high schools. Heck, we do work with middle schools. We don't make them work, I promise. We just do like hackathons and fun things. But truly, what you're seeing is this transformation, I think, in terms of how Ohio is perceived. And when I moved here in 2002, was sort of coming off of, the decline of, the steel industry and the resulting decline of employment. And, here in Cleveland, things like the flats and what have you that have become these really big things had sort of fallen into disrepair. You look 20 years later and you look at how, big Columbus, has gotten, for example. You look at Cincinnati, you look at Cleveland, you look at these tech companies coming in. I think a credit to, the business leaders around the state and how they've changed the perception of, what can I accomplish in Ohio? And now all of a sudden, I think people are realizing that the state's got, this tremendous amount of talent to offer. And, I look especially to guys, and ladies like, my boss or others on our team, our chief, people officer, Debbie Connolly, who have been champions of this for literally 20 plus years,
Yeah.
right? That Cleveland can be a place that you can do this. You can have successful tech. And to your point, for a long time, Hyland was like this sole beacon. And don't get me wrong, that benefited from us, right?
Yeah.
We got a lot of that top talent because of that. But it's a good, healthy thing for the, you know, for the growth of Ohio to see these other companies coming in. And I look at it, you know, really sort of through their eyes as to what's got to be this tremendous sense of pride of how I think Hyland and its involvement in, you know, some of the local, like, you know, Northeast Ohio tech, you know, things, and, you know, some of the incubation that's gone on. And you look and you go, man, it's happening. You know, it took a while to get here, but it's happening.
Yeah, it is amazing. And I love two things that I wrote down was one, your comment on the at bats. And
Yeah,
that's so true because for a long time, we weren't even getting those. And as you said, you know, there's, you know, Hyland was kind of out on this island as kind of the one, you know, tech company out there. And, you know, you got to, if you care about it as a young professional, you're probably leaving the state. And you start to get some of these at bats, some of these things completely out of our control, COVID and supply chain, you know, start to shift, create opportunities in our favor. And then the second thing that you mentioned that I wrote down was the university side and higher education, whether it's 2 years or 4 years. And, you know, there's no mistake of, you know, leadership at, in the business level, the university, you know, higher education level, the civic level. And that's, I think, goes back to your point on culture where, you know, a lot of places, you know, you don't have the collaboration between local and state leaders, you know, across industry, academia, research, all of that. And without that collaboration, states like ours just aren't going to get those at bats and then, you know, make contact with the ball, which I think is just, you know, absolutely vital. And I love that because I don't know if some of these things that, you know, these wins, you know, they build upon themselves and it's a really huge
absolutely.
opportunity, which, you know, we're just starting, you know, at the beginning. I think that's what makes it so exciting. And there's just so much happening here. One thing that I wanted to ask, shifting gears a bit, is your role. And I love to kind of ask when we do interviews like this, kind of a day in the life. You're the chief commercial officer. So I guess kind of a question there is, you know, what does that all entail? And then kind of a second question is, what's a day in the life like for Ed? What are you working on? You wake up, what's it start with? And then by the time you close your laptop at the end of the night, you know, what have you done for the day?
Sure. So, you know, it's a funny title because it doesn't necessarily, you know, roll off the tongue in terms of, so what does that exactly mean?
Yeah.
So Hyland definition, you know, which has evolved over the years. So I've got responsibility really for all of the customer facing side of the organization. So sales, customer success, marketing, services, support. You know, generally speaking, if the customer is going to be interacting with us, it's going to be in one of those departments. So it's about 2,500, you know, of our employees that are in the commercial organization. And, you know, really my role, you know, at the end of the day is to try to address the, you know, the customer experience, you know, whether that's, you know, their a prospective customer, you know, trying to learn more about Hyland through our digital properties, you know, whether they've been a customer for 15 years and they've run into a problem with the software and they're calling support. Literally everything in between there is really kind of, you know, what falls into my purview. And, you know, I think for the better part of my career, you know, a lot of that was that day to day that you ask about was, you know, trying to be out in the field, you know, meeting with prospects, customers, and partners to learn more about their experiences with us, or, you know, strategies they were undertaking, or things they'd like to see in our software, or problems they were having, or, you know, everything in between. I think that, you know, we've always believed that the voice of the customer is how you drive the company. You know, yes, we employ a lot of smart people, but, you know, I don't think we pretend that we're going to sit in some conference room in Westlake and figure out what the customer wants. The best way to know is to ask. And so, you know, I really spent the bulk of my career strapped to an airplane, and then COVID hit, and, you know, we all went home. And so, you know, for the better part of 2 years, you know, it was literally Zoom, every 30 or 60 minutes, from the moment I sat down at my desk until, I got up at the end of the day. And it was, a really big pivot. April of this year was really kind of when we saw travel start to get more normal again. Now, some people were traveling throughout, depends on what sort of line of work you're in, et cetera. But I say April because, one of the things that, I can want to go see somebody, but they got to want to see me.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that's happened is most of our customers are working, remote or hybrid, even in areas like healthcare, areas like IT are often working remote. So it's not easy. It's not as easy as just saying, hey, we're going to, come on site and let's meet. They're not necessarily on site. And so it's been finding new and I think inventive ways to meet with customers. And so maybe it's going there to have breakfast with them, some local restaurant. Maybe it's going to have a lunch, doing a happy hour with their team, having a dinner, finding a way to engage, in this new and different way. Because the one thing I've learned through this, and, I'm nobody's going to ever mistake me for a science expert. But the one thing I've definitely learned is there is something to, I don't know if it's body chemistry, physiology or what, but we can have the exact same conversation we're having now virtually, with the same micro expressions on our faces, the same words, all of it. And it's not the same as doing it in person. It's just not. And so, that ability to reconnect in person is something that I focused on a lot this year. And because our customers are working mostly remote, I focused a lot on it with our employees. Because as you mentioned, we did 5 acquisitions during coronavirus. Most of those employees never met a Hyland person. Many hadn't met, the other acquired employees, and any Hyland person that started after February of 2020 hadn't met other Highlanders either. So I've kind of been on, this engagement tour. I'm going to get a T-shirt made, I think. Sold out. But truly, I've been in the US, I've been to Kansas City, Atlanta, Tampa, Orlando, Chicago, Minneapolis. I've been to Paris, London, Germany, Australia, Japan, South Africa, Bogota, all to see employees. Wow. Because I think that engagement matters. We heard about the great resignation last year. I think a lot of it is because people felt disconnected from their employers. Things started to feel very mercenary. You lost that sense of purpose. And so I think, engagement became really important. So I think in addition to everything I said about being, sort of that, customer component, under one roof, I think it's also incumbent to be that employee engagement component from an executive standpoint, to let them know that, we know they're there and we care and we appreciate them. And frankly, to connect them with one another, because one of the employees came up to me at the end of a happy hour and she said, you know what, this is the happy hour I didn't know I needed. And, what she meant was she just was looking for that connection. So that's, how the job is kind of evolving, it's this, I think this connection point to our customers and to our employees. Yeah,
I love that. And I love that anecdote with your colleague that mentioned, the happy hour that she didn't know she needed, because I think that's so true where, Zooms have been great and you're able to do more meetings via Zoom and all of this. And, probably all of us, we got a little, used to it, and that was the new normal. But as we opened back up, that's happened to me so many times where, a conversation like this is fantastic for so many reasons. But when you do have those in-person interactions, just the energy and that connection that the, in real life world allows, you do walk away with that kind of that buzz that you just aren't going to get, especially when there's, I think larger gatherings, like a happy hour. There's lots of Zoom happy hours, but it's not the same as an in-person one where you actually get to connect, or conferences or things like that. And that was actually a great answer to us segueing to the second and final kind of half of our conversation today, Ed, is we ask 5 questions to all of our guests. They're kind of quick questions. The answers don't necessarily have to be quick, but it's fun to get perspectives again of Fortune 500 executives, startup founders, CEOs, researchers, you name it, that are doing different. So the first one, which, in some ways you answered, and so you're welcome to kind of use that, or you can use it and go a different route. But our first question that we ask is, what is a challenge you're working to solve? So it could be, big picture. Sometimes it's a startup founder who's building an entire new company. Sometimes it's an executive who has 2,500 employees across the world, and trying to make sure that customer and employee engagement is there. So what's a challenge that you're currently working to solve?
I'm going to use these two terms interchangeably, in this idea of experience and expectations. And really, when I say that, I think that, prior to the pandemic, I think we were seeing trends around heightened expectations in customer experience. I think that, as people were becoming, much more comfortable with, Amazon, for example, and, the fact that I can order something and, have it show up the next day starts to influence, my expectations, that, when my insurance company for my car, I want to be able to do all that, via my mobile device. Right. Well, there were, I think, generational differences in those expectations. And then the pandemic hit. And then we all became tech savants, right? We all started ordering our groceries online. We all started ordering, from DoorDash. We all started, we were figuring out how to live our lives, very much through the face of a phone or a tablet or a laptop. People that you could never ever imagine using Zoom, all of a sudden we're like, oh no, you go over here to the share button. And so what really, I think, happened was everyone started saying, well, I want all my experiences to be as simple as it is for me to order my groceries, or to order from Amazon, or I want things to happen just as quickly as those things happen, or I want, to be able to interact in a very, real-time way, because that's what I'm doing in my personal life, and I should expect to do it in my business life. And so for Hyland, it means our customers have a different level of expectations from us. We're now living in this cloud-based world, right, where we, expect everything in real time. Well, what's happened is our customers for years the users were the people that worked for the customer. Well, now more than 50% of the users of our systems are, well, let's call it the customer's customer. Maybe it's the patient of a hospital. Maybe it's the student of a university. Maybe it's the insured of some insurance company. They're now wanting to interact with information that is housed by our customer, but needs to be exposed in a user experience that's simple, that's easy, that's fast, that's secure, and do it in real time. And so our customers, of course, are coming and saying, hey, I got to live up to this higher level of expectations. Hyland, you've got to live up to these higher levels of expectations. And everything becomes, sort of much more, I'm going to say iterative, but what I mean by that is everything has to happen with a greater frequency, right? Customers, the idea of as a service, it doesn't extend to just software that I use. It's, I want you to help me manage the software so I can focus on other things. I want you to help me, enhance it, expand it. I want you to do those things because I don't have time to train people and get them up and learn your software and run it. I just want you to do these things. And so we're seeing this, kind of unbelievable expectation of experience, but it's no different than with employees, right? If I'm an employee and, the customer calls up, and let's say I work in a call center and the customer calls up and they're frustrated and I can't get the information, and so I'm getting screamed at all day, I'm going to go work somewhere else. It's going to give me a better employee experience where I don't get screamed at all the time. So this expectation or experience thing has really manifested itself both with, with customers and with employees. And I think it's put management and senior executives on notice, right? That the reality is choice is out there. You know, there's a cloud solution for everything, and there's an employer for everyone. And so we're kind of collectively all on notice that you better put this as number one on your list. You better address customer experience and you better address employee experience, or you're going to find yourself without as many of both as you'd like.
Yeah.
And so that, you know, kind of my problem to solve is every day figuring out how do we do that better?
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Second question. What is a favorite read, listen, or watch? So this could be a book, podcast, or show. Doesn't have to be one of each, but just a favorite read, listen, or watch, maybe something you're into now or something that you revisit once a year.
Well, you told me there's video also, and there's people see the smirk on my face. So I'm sadly and embarrassingly a lot less intellectual when it comes to, let's call, off the field pursuits. I do listen to, you know, some podcasts at times that, you know, there's a guy named Tom Bilyeu out there that has one called Impact Theory that I like a lot. There's a couple of those, but you know, I often use that time to tune out a little bit. You know, I am a big fan of, you know, things like The Challenger Sale was a favorite book of mine. You know, they've kind of done some updates around, you know, customer centric activities that I've enjoyed, but I probably do more listening to like TED Talks.
Yeah.
So, you know, the Brene Browns, the Simon Sinek's, the, you know, folks like that. I think part of it is my own ADD and the ability to only pay attention for about 10 minutes at a time.
Yeah. And I will note that your comment on, you know, kind of the ones you can kind of zone or veg out on, especially I think that is more, you know, that's a very common one, an answer for that. And I think what we found was it was, you know, especially in COVID, as we've talked about, you know, you're sitting at home behind a computer on Zooms, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, back to back to back to back to back. At some point, you just gotta not do that. And you can't spend 12 hours a day, you know, working and watching more stuff and reading it. And I'm the same way. At the end of the day, you gotta, you know, it's college football, pro football. Like you got to have that thing to look forward to at the end of the day. And you know,
yeah, I'm a sports person, and it's kind of the one thing that I watch that my brain sort of shuts off. And so, you know, I kind of, you know, I tell people if I'm not working, I'm probably watching sports. And it's just, it's my coping mechanism.
You got to have that refresh. You got to have that thing that, you know, allows you to wake up in the morning, you know, ready to get back after it. So, I'm with you on the sports. Third question is, what is a problem you'd solve or a business you would start if funding was no issue? And so this is you know, this is our moonshot question. Flying cars, you know, cures for diseases, you know, something big for you.
You know, it's funny. I work with an executive group, and we had a speaker recently, and he kind of said, look, if I'm your VC person and I handed you $10 million, you know, what would you invest in? And so I think if, you know, I think if I had that money, I am a big believer in what's coming with the metaverse. You know, and that answer may sound, you know, cliche. I've got sons that are 24 and 21. That generation does not distinguish between, you know, IRL, right, in real life, and the metaverse the way that, you know, I do. You know, to me, there's a very clear distinction. To them, an online friend who they've never met in person is no different than what I would call a friend, which is, you know, someone that I know in person for a long time. So the idea of the metaverse, which may sound crazy to people of my generation, and you know, having this place where you meet people and interact and buy clothing and build a house and, you know, maybe even have a job, that sounds so crazy. If you don't really distinguish between, you know, in real life and the online world, it's not so crazy. And, you know, I think if you look at where that's going, you know, people like my kids, it's going to be massive. It's hard to see it any other way.
Yeah.
So that, that would be my one. My sadder one, to be honest, is I think I would try to develop cooling clothes, because I think, as climate change is upon us, and having recently moved to Florida, I'll tell you, if I could wear clothes that would actually cool me while I wore them, I'd pay a lot for that.
Yeah.
So that's my moonshot.
Yeah, that's a fact. I have not heard that one. That's a really good one.
How do you like that one?
Yeah, no, that's one of the more interesting ones I've heard, which I love that. Fourth and fifth are kind of similar themed, but we'll go with four number to start. What's your favorite place in Ohio?
My family fell in love with Catawba.
Okay.
So, up there on the lake, we kind of found boating in 2019 and getting out on Lake Erie and getting out in the water. And, for as as an Ohio person, for all the stick that Ohio takes from, outside of Ohio, man, Lake Erie is, it's a gem. It really is. And, we enjoyed a lot of days, out in the water. We, went to the islands, and that Catawba area is just, it's a beautiful spot to do it from. So I think that would be my favorite.
Yeah. Lake Erie is one of our both, for recreation and fun and all that. And also just, as we talk about some of these tech and kind of business and, opportunities, it's one of our greatest, greatest strengths we have going for us. So that's a good one. Sure. Yeah. Final one. What's your favorite meal in Ohio? So you mentioned, taking a customer out to dinner, taking team members out to dinner. Where would you be going? And ordering, I should say.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's funny, as a company, we had, of course, our favorite haunts that we were, taking customers for years and years. So there's a place in Westlake called the Cabin Club that was right near our office. That was a go-to. There's a place in Avon called Strip Steakhouse. So those were where you took people for the nice dinners. If the customer was more of a casual, hey, I just want to go somewhere and chill out and enjoy. We probably kept it a little bit simpler. We'd go to one of the Mexican places around the office. We've got some fun ones near there. So that's probably those are probably the go-tos. That the thing is, we talk about sort of the I don't know if you want to call it gentrification of the Cleveland area or just how it's grown. Man, the restaurants, downtown Cleveland, east side, west side. I mean, those are the areas I'm sure, and I've been to, what is it? Jeff, is it Ruby's?
Yeah. Jeff Ruby's. Yeah.
That place is unbelievable. Went to a place called, I think it's called The Top down in Columbus. That's unbelievable. If I was standing up, you could tell I love food and it loves me. And man, there are just no lack of good places to eat around the area. So I've probably hit them all at some point.
Yeah. Well, great ones. Cleveland has incredible food, downtown, east side, west side. But Ed, this has been a terrific conversation. I've really enjoyed it, really getting to chat with you and get to know you and your work. As a final one, how can people learn more about Hyland? How can they connect with you? Anything you want to point folks to? And we can also put this, I should say, in the show notes.
Yeah, sure. So, the best way to learn, obviously, is to hit up Hyland.com. We've got some great information out there. As I mentioned, we've been a Gartner leader at what we do for, 13 years now. In fact, we acquired a company called Alfresco that's, also a Gartner leader. So, we've got some tremendous information out on Hyland.com. I would say there's our blog. Has some great information to it as well. So blog.hyland. We've got YouTube channels. So no lack of places to go. And if all else fails, one thing I take pride in is I've worked at Hyland long enough that I'm just at Hyland.com. So that means a lot to me. And that's another way to get to reach out if you want information.
I love that. A company with 5,000 employees, you got the first name at Hyland.com, and you can't beat that.
Right. That's right. They can't take it back from me. I've got it.
All right. Well, Ed, thank you again so much for your time today. Everything you're doing, Hyland is doing. We're grateful at Ohio X for the partnership that we've been able to have with a bunch of folks on your team. And it's an exciting time in Ohio, and it's because of leaders like yourself and companies like Hyland. So we're appreciative. And again, for folks listening, we'll put this in the show notes. So connect with Ed, shoot him a note, and check out what Hyland's up to. Incredible company, Westlake, Ohio. And thrilled that we could have you and the Hyland story on Built in Ohio. And I think it's an incredible one to be able to share. So I want to thank everyone for listening. If you wouldn't mind, give us 5 stars so more folks can hear stories like Ed's and Hyland's, and we can keep sharing the story of tech in Ohio and the people, companies, and ideas building it all. But Ed, again, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Yeah.
This has been a great conversation.
My pleasure. Thanks, Chris, for having me.